Hello. The goal of this series is simple. I am going to try to help you learn to take compelling underwater pictures, while at the same time avoiding many of the missed opportunities that I have made over the years. This is a 10-step series. You can download the entire outline for free on my website, www.theaquaticeye.com. With underwater photography, it's not about how good your camera equipment is. It's about a mindset, an approach to underwater photography, understanding the obstacles and the work you put into it, both before, during, and after the dive trip. Last time we talked about what to shoot. Subject selection is so important. On this step, step 5, we're talking about shooting the subject. Okay, we found a subject that is approachable, where we're not going to damage the reef. Maybe it's on a ledge. Maybe it's on a sandy shore where we can lie back and not worry about resting our arms on an adjacent rock. Now we have to approach the subject. It's so important to approach the subject slowly. When I see something, before even going after the subject, I will take my time and say, where am I going to position my strobes? How should I set my aperture and my shutter speed? And I'll fool around with that and take a couple pictures of an adjacent rock or coral just to see how the lighting is, to make sure everything works. I'll check my histogram. And it's also important to make every effort not to look your subject in the eye. For some reason, they seem to be skittish with eye contact. If you start taking pictures of adjacent rocks or coral, sometimes I've found that once they know you're not after them, they sometimes actually will swim up to you. Anyway, now we take a couple of shots. We don't just zoom right in then, we gradually take a couple more shots. I'll check my histogram, but not every time, because sometimes just moving the camera to check the histogram and adjust the strobes will scare it. But every so often, I'll step back a little bit, look at the histogram, make a few little adjustments, gradually move in. Now, once we get a few shots, we don't just say, okay, let's swim away and let's try to find something else. No. This is when we really work the subject. We can experiment with different angles, different apertures, different types of focus, different strobe positions. And this is what I'm going to show you. Here's a little fish that I found just sitting at the sand looking at me at the Blue Heron Bridge. I fired a couple shots and saw that it didn't just swim away. So I gradually fired a few more shots, checked my histogram, adjusted my strobes, moved in, and took 3 or 4 shots, getting closer and closer until it finally swam away. But here's how close I was able to get. I was down low, I got a non-conflicting background, and a nice portrait shot. Here's an example of a flounder that I saw sitting on the top of a rock. I knew this would be a great subject selection because I could get below the flounder, get close to it potentially, and shoot up without having a distracting background. I would have a blue water background. But flounders are notoriously skittish, and I thought it might just swim away, which very often it did. So I took a couple of test shots, which you can see here, and then I gradually moved in. Now I got a little lower, and I was able to get the 2 eyes with a blue water background, and the flounder still stayed there. He would move the eyes, would rotate them a little bit. I even got a picture of the flounder with one eye looking one way and one the other way. So I decided to work the subject. I adjusted my settings, pulled my strobes in a little tighter, and tried to move in even more closely. Luckily, I was able to get a very good shot of its eye looking at me and its mouth. I finally was able to get one lucky shot very close up of its beautiful eye from a side view, and after that, it swam away. I was in the Caymans in 2008, and I saw this lizard fish that struck my attention, not because there was a little goby on its head, but because it was sitting on a ledge. So instead of shooting down at the fish, I would be able to get below it and maybe shoot up with a non-distracting background. Again, lizard fish are notorious for being skittish. I took a few shots, and it didn't seem to move very much. I was able to get close, and I got a different angle. I was able to get a close-up of its eyes and teeth. Then I got one from under the ledge and kind of shot from underneath, showing its chin and its eyes. I even was able to get a closer macro shot of part of its teeth and its eye. And then what I thought was a very interesting angle, I didn't know how it would turn out. It turned out to be one of my favorite pictures of the whole trip. From underneath the lizardfish, I got its mouth and its eye. One final example, a French angelfish that was posing for me. He was very cooperative, so I was able to get different shots of its eye. I got behind it, was able to get the eye protruding from the head from the back, and even a nice little portrait shot of part of its face and the eye. Other things you can fool around with, especially if there's a distracting background, you can open up the aperture and blur the background. That leaves you with very limited depth of field, but you can focus on one thing. Here I was able to get both eyes of the blenny in sharp focus, while I had a colorful background, but not a lot of distractions from the coral. So this concludes this segment on shooting the subject. Once you find a suitable subject, approach it slowly, and then really work the subject. Take many shots.